Uncharted 4 is a game that has been a long time coming and has gathered a huge amount of hype over the last year or so. This final outing for Nathan Drake sees developer Naughty Dog set the bar for what gaming can be. The game is quite simply stunning, with photorealistic visuals, beautiful locations and fun gameplay. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is one of the most anticipated Sony releases for the PS4 so far, and is certainly up there with the biggest releases of all time. Naughty Dog has delivered some fantastic experiences over the years, and the first Uncharted was the reason I bought a PS3. It's extremely clear from the get-go that Naughty Dog have put a tremendous amount of time, effort and love into this game, and every moment feels unique and utterly breathtaking. The characters, story, gameplay and environmental design are all top-notch and come together to make one of the best gaming experiences in recent times. I will also say that this Uncharted game has clearly taken ideas and technical aspects from The Last of Us and used them to improve the experience here. A Thief's End feels like a massive blockbuster movie, but also has fantastic gameplay and huge amounts of depth to it. It takes a little while to get going, with a brief opening that sees you play as a young Nathan Drake, similar to previous segments of Uncharted games. Chapter 1 introduces Nathan's brother Sam, his now long-lost brother who's never been mentioned in previous editions. Before starting the game and knowing Nathan's brother was going to be introduced in this game with no mention at all in previous games, it made me a little sceptical and I thought it might feel forced, but in fact it is done fantastically well, and the reasons for why Nathan has never mentioned his brother is understandable. I wasn't sure if I was going to like Sam at first, but he's a fantastic addition to the game and adds another perspective to the events that unfold. This game allows the player to learn much more about Nate's childhood and upbringing than any of the previous games. Naughty Dog have shown that they can not only make great games that are fun to play, but also deliver interesting stories with characters that feel real. Nate's relationships with Sam, Sully and Elena is what makes the game so compelling and investing. After playing as a young Nathan Drake, you skip forward to the older version. Drake has settled down with Elena and now is living a somewhat normal life. Suddenly Nate's older brother Sam, who is thought to be dead, returns with some troubling news. I don't want to give too much away for the reasons why Sam has returned, but it's exciting, scary and sets up the premise of what has to come in store. From this point on, Nate begins his adventure and sets off on a journey that sees him exploring, making massive discoveries and faces some big twists. What makes the game so great is how it manages to have huge set pieces, full-on combat and death-defying stunts, but then manages to have moments of calm that allow for character development, and we learn more about Nate's relationships and the people around him. Uncharted 4 doesn't have some of the more outrageous set pieces that we've seen in previous games, but what it does well is having chapters that feel slower paced and then moves into the next with fast paced action. This helps to exaggerate the action and gives the game good pacing. It leaves you wanting to find out what happens next. I loved The Last of Us, but I was worried that the dark and somber tone would seep too much into the Uncharted game, where I feel it's meant to be much more light-hearted and fun, with some serious story elements threaded throughout. Uncharted 4 still keeps its relatively light and slightly more serious personal journeys though. The Last of Us certainly seeps into this game, but only in a good way. Uncharted 4 also has some very funny moments and manages to inject humour throughout the intense action and personal stories. The story is great and made even better with fantastic voice acting and some extremely talented actors like Nolan North, Troy Baker, Emily Rose and Richard Mulligan. The writing is fantastic and the cast inject real personality and flair into the characters, which Naughty Dog seem to do better than any other developer. The Uncharted 4 story is mostly centred around the search of a pirate captain Henry Avery's long-lost treasure. The adventure is interesting enough, but its relationships is what makes the game so compelling and personal. Probably one of the most obvious aspects taken from The Last of Us is the way in which Nate can pair up with other characters, like the combo of Joel and Ellie, to fight your way through the game. Nate is almost always paired up with another non-player character, and you also get the choice to go in guns blazing or can go in with a more stealthy approach. Not only does the gameplay here feel great, but the dialogue and banter between the characters feels genuine and made me want to always hear what each character had to say. The dialogue is extremely clever, and the depth to the conversational mechanics is unlike any other gaming experience. It feels realistic and natural, and the characters and they feel like what they would do in real life. I've always been a fan of the combat in the Uncharted series, although some say it's not the strongest part of the game. In Uncharted 4 the combat is better than ever. The gunplay here feels improved, and we also see some nice new additions to the gameplay like Nate's grappling hook. The movement feels smooth, and traversing ledges, environments and moving into cover feels better than ever. Enemies this time around still feel much the same as previous games, but I felt the reasons for them being there was much more believable. You face similar enemy types like in previous installments, whether it's snipers, heavy armoured enemies, or bad guys with shotguns and so on. The enemy types feel a bit limited, but there's so much else going on that it doesn't impact the overall experience. Uncharted 4 is simply stunning in terms of visuals, and is quite possibly one of the best looking games I've ever played, and I've played a lot of games in my lifetime. The characters look insanely realistic with awesome facial animations, movement, and it simply has some of the most photorealistic characters ever seen in a video game. The expressions on characters' faces really do show emotion, and it looks like you're looking at real people. Then there's the various locations you visit that have absolutely stunning environments that are wonderfully designed. You will journey through urban areas, jungles, and even head underwater. Every single area and corner of each location feels dense, detailed, and full of interesting things to explore. I would often find myself stopping at times to simply look at how beautiful the game is, and the addition of photo mode can mean you can capture these beautiful moments. The game is far less guided than past games, but still subtly gives you guide you along a particular path. There are now small open areas that you can explore, and you can even use the new climbing and traversal mechanics, including a few drivable vehicles. The game allows you to explore much more than in previous games, and overall it feels much less linear. The game still has some puzzle elements, but they're not as frequent or even as frustrating as the previous games. Each puzzle is both clever in its design and is well thought out for the story. They always felt purposeful and part of the story, and I actually really enjoyed these moments as they didn't feel overused. They also help break up the gameplay and add a slower paced feel to the game when there's combat and action. Multiplayer returns this time around, and it feels better than ever. I haven't had time to put in a huge amount of gameplay sessions yet, but I will be heading back to it. I've played enough to give a few comments on how it plays. You can choose loadouts, characters, and buy boosters before starting a game, and that plays very well. The shooting feels good, but I did find that the hand-to-hand combat feels a bit clumsy and cumbersome at times. The multiplayer has a few different game modes that add some good variation, and the game has plenty of unlockables. Some people may not even think about playing the multiplayer and simply play the campaign, but I would certainly recommend that you give it a go after finishing the main game. Overall, Uncharted 4 is simply one of the best games in recent years, and is arguably one of the best games of this generation. Despite the hype, credentials, or fan following, the game is worth recommending by all accounts. From the fantastic characters, to the beautiful environments, to the immersive story, it's an experience that feels unrivaled for this current generation. Gaming is all about having fun, and Uncharted 4 is not only played great, but looks visually impressive, and has the emotional depth and impactful relationships that develop during the campaign. The writing here is brilliant and helps elevate the game to an even higher standard. It's the perfect send-off to the series and Nate's journey. I would still recommend playing the previous games first, which you can pick up in the form of the Uncharted collection, as the game is heavily focused on relationships that have developed over the series. There are also tons of references and nods to previous games, even Golden Abyss on the Vita. I don't want to spoil anything about Chapter 4, but it has possibly one of my favourite moments in any game in a long time, with a cameo from a beloved PlayStation icon and mascot. Naughty Dog have proven once again that they can produce stellar experiences, and in my opinion are consistently setting new standards for what video games can be. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you next time.